Hey everyone, welcome to day 169 of Bible 365. I am your host, Kathy Carter, and I am sharing with you my love of the Bible because I love the Lord and I love reading His Word. And what I want everyone to do is I want you guys to actually read the Bible with me and then join me in this session of kind of like trying to understand it and make sense of what the Bible says. So you would be using the 1 Year Chronological Bible Reading Plan, which you can download and find online at oneyearbibleonline.com. So today is day 169. It is June 17th, and our reading today is 2 Chronicles 21:8 through 22:9, and then 2 Kings 8:23 through chapter 10. So I just wanted to whiteboard it a little bit, and because we have some extra kings, and what the reason I wanted to whiteboard it, and the reason I actually did whiteboard it, was I actually recorded this yesterday, and I totally screwed it up. Because then I was just starting to write it in the whiteboard, I realized how bad I messed it up. So last time I opened up this whiteboard, I kind of gave you the background of this. So as you can see, David and Solomon were the first kings, right? So if we're going back to sort of the beginning of the kingdom where there were kings in Israel, and then it's split into two areas. It's split up into two areas. It's split up into Judah, which is the sons of David, and then into Israel, which is not the sons of David. So the descendants of David. So at this point, we've had Rehoboam, who was king, Abijah, who was king, Asa and Jehoshaphat, and they were good kings. The last we did this, Jehoshaphat was the king in Judah, which is the southern kingdom, right? So Judah and Benjamin and the Levites are all down in the southern kingdom. Everybody else is in the northern kingdom, and that's Israel. And you can see you've got a ton of kings over in Israel. But when we left, it was Ahab and Jezebel. And so Ahab was killed. And so this leaves Jezebel, and then his son wound up taking over, who was Ahaziah. From here today, we see a little bit of Jehoram, a little bit of Ahaziah on that side. I got my two Ahaziahs screwed up. So a little bit of Ahaziah, who's the son of Jehoram, and then we have Ahaziah, Joram, and Jehu. And that's how we're going to end today, with Jehu kind of cleaning house a little bit, and we'll see what happens with that. But Ahaziah is Jehoram's son from the kingdom of Judah, the southern kingdom, and Ahaziah is Ahab's son. And they both actually reigned for extremely short periods of time. So I got them all messed up. So if you've been reading and you might have sort of scrambled over the names because they're names that we don't use right now, like they're not really common, like Mark or John, it's easy to probably get those messed up. So I just wanted to show you that, and so you kind of can see where we are in chronologically, right? Like where we are and how that can make sense. So I hope that helps. And as I say these names, now you're going to know, I hope, who it is that we're speaking of. Hopefully I'll know who it is we're speaking of. Okay. So we're starting in our reading. It is June 17th, and we are starting in 2 Chronicles 21. All right, so we have some of the background. You know who all the kings are. And you know at this point, and if you haven't been with me, I want you to go back before you come forward. But if you don't know, most of the kings in Israel, actually all of the kings in Israel, have not followed the Lord. They know who the Lord is, but they have not been following him in the way that they're supposed to be following him. They haven't listened to his decrees. They were promised a dynasty if they did, and yet unfortunately they were not. They didn't do anything. They didn't do the right thing. So here we go. We're in 2 Chronicles 21:8, verse 8. In the time of Jehoram, so this is down in, I'm pointing to it like you can see it. This is down in the southern kingdom of Judah. In the time of Jehoram, Edom rebelled against Judah and set up its own king. So during the time of David, he conquered a lot of territories. And then a lot of those territories started coming under the umbrella of Israel. They were not Israelites, but they were servants and followers of the king of Israel, which at that time, first it was David and then it was Solomon. So what's happening is everything is starting to break apart. So the kingdom itself broke apart. And then we saw Aram, if you remember, and we're going to see a little bit of Aram today. Aram sort of joined forces at a couple of times. We see them joining forces with the king of Aram in order to work together to defeat another person. And Edom is the same way. So Edom was servants under them, and now we start to see they're setting up their own kingdom, and they're breaking away from Israel. Jehoram then goes there with his officers and all his chariots. So he goes there, and then he's surrounded by all of these Edomites. At the same time, it says, and then it says, but he rose up and he got away. So nothing happened to him, but he got away. But Edom still was not under the rule of Israel anymore. And then Libnah revolts at the same time because Jehoram has forsaken the Lord, the God of his ancestors. In verse 11, it says, he's also built high places on the hills of Judah and caused the people of Jerusalem to prostitute themselves and had led Judah astray. So they're turning away because they're like, he's no longer with the Lord. And if you remember from chapters ago, those who were with the Lord was rewarding them, and they were winning wars, they were winning territory, right? They weren't dying like the other kingdoms. Not that people weren't dying, but in the wars that they were in, they weren't suffering casualties in the way that the other people were suffering casualties. So it was good to follow the Lord. It was good to be one of the Lord's people. And so they noticed that Jehoram is not doing that. And up to this point, we saw for a few generations they were, because they had Asa and Jehoshaphat, and they followed the Lord. And so now we're starting to see that they're turning away from the Lord. Now, I thought this was really interesting because it says it causes the people of Jerusalem to prostitute themselves. And this is actually something that Elijah says as well. So without being too graphic, prostituting yourself is doing things for money, right? Certain things that I'm not going to say so I don't get banned off of YouTube. So it's doing certain things for money. And so Elijah from the Lord is saying that that's what Jehoram has caused his people to do. He's caused his people to prostitute themselves. So to give themselves up for a financial gain or for a gain, right? So they've turned away from the Lord and they've turned to this like selfish desire of giving themselves away. Everything that's important and special about themselves, they've turned away from the Lord and they've given that to other people, right? Who they've been used by in terrible ways. So he says this, the Lord says this to Elijah, but we see this kind of theme now start to follow throughout the Israelite people. And we see that the importance of keeping yourself pure and clean for the Lord, right? And obviously being careful, but that's what the Lord is like. The Lord is clean and all things good. And we consistently turn away and we give ourselves away to something that is not good, right? And so what we want to do is turn back to the Lord and turn towards all things that are good. All right, so Jehoram receives a letter from Elijah. So remember, at this point, Elijah, well, up to now in our chronological reading, Elijah has passed. So this is a little bit in the past. We see a little bit in the past. So he's kind of rehashing some of this stuff. So Elijah the prophet got a letter, or sent a letter, to Jehoram from the Lord. This is what the Lord, the God of your father David says. You've not followed the ways of Jehoshaphat or of Asa. It says, you follow really what Ahab followed. And you've also murdered your own brothers, members of your own family that were better than you. And then he says, the Lord is about to strike your people, your sons, and everything that is yours with a heavy blow. And then you are going to be really ill with a lingering disease of the bowels. And eventually your bowels are going to come out. So it's going to be a terrible disease. Verse 16, the Lord aroused against Jehoram the Philistines and then the Arabs. They attacked, invaded, and they took everything. So once he's turned to the Lord, now people are starting to come after them. People are starting to build up their own kingdoms, and they're starting to revolt and come against Jehoram. And so they're going to take everything he has. They're going to take all of his sons. They're going to take all of his money. And then eventually we also see that he does get ill. So it says his youngest son was left to him, but all the other sons were gone. And then it says the Lord afflicted Jehoram with an incurable disease of the bowels. And at the end of his second year, his bowels came out, and he died in great pain. So verse 20 says, Jehoram was 32 years old when he became king. He reigned 8 years. He passed away to no one's regret and was buried in the city of David, but not in the tombs of the kings. So he wasn't even given the honor of being buried in the tombs of the kings. So he had one son that was left, and this is Ahaziah. So this is in the kingdom of Judah. Ahaziah is the king. This king, so it says in verse 25, so 2 Kings 8:25, in the 12th year of Joram, who was up in the north, I put here, but up in the northern kingdom in Israel, son of Ahab. Ahaziah, son of Jehoram, becomes king of Judah, right? So upstairs is Joram, downstairs is now Ahaziah. He was 22 years old when he became king, and he ruled 1 year. He was a granddaughter, his mom was a granddaughter of Omri. He followed the ways of the house of Ahab and did evil in the eyes of the Lord, and was married to Ahab's family. In verse 28, it says, Ahaziah went with Joram, son of Ahab, to war against Hazael, king of Aram. So if you remember, this is one of the things I was talking about. They used to be all together, and now they're kind of all separated, and now Aram is going to war against the two kings of Israel, the king of Israel and the king of Judah. So Ahaziah, son of Jehoram, king of Judah, goes down to Jezreel to see Joram, son of Ahab, because he got hurt. So in the battle, there was a battle, Joram gets hurt. Joram runs away. Ahaziah comes and he visits him. And this is kind of where some of the big stuff happens. Okay. So in verse 7 of 2 Chronicles 22, it says, through Ahaziah's visit to Joram, God brought about Ahaziah's downfall. When he arrived, he went out with Joram to meet Jehu, son of Nimshi, whom the Lord had anointed to destroy the house of Ahab. So his patience has worn thin. This is it. And now the Lord is sending somebody new. He's lifting somebody up in order to destroy this house. He's destroying the house of Ahab. Jezebel is still alive. So if we go to 2 Kings 9, verse 1, it says, the prophet Elisha summoned a man from the company of the prophets and said to him, tuck your cloak in your belt, take this olive oil with you, and go to Ramoth Gilead, and then look for Jehu. So the Lord is now anointing someone new to take over, which is Jehu. So remember, the Lord has lifted this guy up to kind of kill the house of Ahab. This guy is the commander of armies. So he's somebody that someone knows. He's someone that's really, really valiant in battle. Like really, like he's like a person that people follow. And then he's going to go and say that the Lord anoints him king. So in verse 6, it says, Jehu gets up, goes into the house, and the prophet pours oil on his head and declares, this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I anoint you king over the Lord's people, Israel. And then he follows up and says, you're to destroy the house of Ahab, your master, and I will avenge the blood of my servants, the prophets, and the blood of all the Lord's servants shed by Jezebel. So the Lord is going to avenge everyone by taking out Jezebel, and Jehu is meant to take out all of Ahab's family. And it's interesting. I'm just wondering, like, was she too strong that he wasn't supposed to take her out? Or was there something where God was like, she was so bad that the Lord needed to show that it was him and him alone that was the one who took her out? So I'm not sure. And it could be a mixture of both. It says, I will make the house of Ahab like the house of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, and the house of Baasha, son of Ahijah. As for Jezebel, dogs will devour her on the plot of ground at Jezreel, and no one will bury her. And then Jehu kind of like tells everybody what he says. So now we're going to see what he does. They take up the mantle of Jehu being king because he was anointed by the prophets. And then in 2 Kings 9:14, it says, so Jehu, son of Jehoshaphat, the son of Nimshi, conspired against Joram. They had all been going to war. And then it says, he comes and he brings, so there again, war against Hazael. And then Jehu comes and brings all of his people up. And so one by one, messengers are sent out. It's like, oh, that looks like Jehu out there. So they send a messenger out and they said, hey, do you come in peace? And then Jehu says to the messenger, get behind me, essentially. So he kind of adds the messenger into his group, and then they send a second messenger, and it's the same thing. Instead of the messenger going back, they send him back in the group. So I feel like Ahaziah and Jehoram are getting probably a little bit confused. So it said the lookout reports, he's reached them, but he isn't coming back either. The driving is like that of Jehu. And then so Joram and Ahaziah go out to meet him themselves, and they say, are you coming in peace? Jehu replies, how can there be peace as long as all the idolatry and witchcraft of your mother Jezebel abound? So he's letting him know immediately what he's there for, what his purpose and his intent are. And then in verse 24, it says, Jehu then draws his bow, shoots Joram between the shoulders, pierces his heart, and he dies. Jehu said to his chariot, he says, pick him up and throw him on the field. And then they remember this old prophecy that happened, which I think is really fascinating. So God is always speaking. I love this because they're like, oh, do you remember when this guy Naboth was out there and he did wrong. So here, I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. Okay, so it says, yesterday I saw the blood of Naboth and the blood of his sons, declares the Lord, and I will surely make you pay for it on this plot of ground, declares the Lord. This is what the Lord said, and this is what the guys overheard. So he says, Ahab, remember how you and I were riding together in chariots behind Ahab, his father, when the Lord spoke this prophecy against him. So they remember what the Lord said, and this is what God does. God always, when you think you're hearing the Lord, because I think a lot of us do this, right? We're like, oh, the Lord told us to do whatever certain thing the Lord told us to do, or I believe that this thing is going to happen, right? And I know in a lot of ways we kind of want to beware false prophets, because we can believe and have faith in those prophecies that don't come true, right? Like if you guys remember many, many years ago, there were some people who sold all of their property because the end was coming, right? Like people love prophesying the year that the end is coming. They love reading through the book of the Revelation and going, this is the year, sell all your stuff. The end is coming because it's one world, this, that, or the other. So people love to do these prophecies. And we need to be really, really careful of those things, and we need to test it. And that's what the Lord allows us to do, right? So they heard this prophecy. It doesn't seem like they did anything with it, right? They didn't try to make this prophecy come true in any way. They waited on the Lord. The Lord gave them the prophecy. They waited on the Lord. It came true. And now for them, there's a strong confirmation that that was a prophecy from the Lord. So now they can share that prophecy with us, right? So then we can have confidence that the Lord does these things. So when you hear a prophecy, or when you feel like God is speaking to you, right? There's going to be confirmation with those things, because that's the way the Lord works. He's not trying to trick any of us. He's trying to make it very obvious and very clear that he is here. So they heard this, and then they wound up throwing him out on that ground. So they threw Ahab out on that ground, and then that prophecy came true from there. And then it says in verse 27, when Ahaziah, king of Judah, saw what happened, he fled up the road to Beth-Hagan. So I just want to be clear on this, because they're like, kill him too. And then he goes up, and then when he goes up there, it says he dies there, right? So it says his servants took him, he escaped to Medigo and died there. That's kind of all we see, except a little bit further in these chapters in 2 Chronicles 22, 8 and 9, which is part of our reading today. It has a little follow-up on this. And it says, while Jehu was executing judgment on the house of Ahab, he found the officials of Judah and the sons of Ahaziah's relatives who had been attending him, and he killed them. So he was killing all these households, right? Then he went in search of Ahaziah and his men. Went in search of Ahaziah, and his men captured him while he was hiding in Samaria. He was brought to Jehu and put to death. And then they buried him because he was a son of Jehoshaphat. I want to hit on a point there as well, but just so we know that like it's not two different stories. It's not that he died of natural causes there. It's that he got there, he was hiding there, and then Jehu wound up finding him and killed him. So that's how we see that connection working in that piece. Now, what is great is that what we see happen to Ahab, right? Because Ahab was awful, and Jehoram was terrible. What we see happen to Ahaziah is a little bit different. He was brought to Jehu and put to death. They buried him, for they said he was a son of Jehoshaphat who sought the Lord with all his heart. So because he sought the Lord with all of his heart, because Jehoshaphat sought the Lord with all of his heart, his son was buried because of that, right? So they didn't just leave him out on the plains and do nothing with him. So that just once again shows you the responsibilities that we have. All right. So those two things connected. So I wanted to make sure that we saw all that. And then we're going to move on. So we're going to see what Jehu does. He does a lot of stuff. So here he comes to Jezebel. Verse 30. Jehu went to Jezreel. Jezebel hears about it. He enters the gate and she asks, have you come in peace? Which I feel like everyone's asked this at this point, and he has not come to peace for any of these people. He looks up at her window. He shouts out to the people that are in there, and he says, who's on my side? So he's shouting to the people inside there with her. Who's on my side? And then 2 or 3 eunuchs look down. So I guess they're confirming that they're on his side. And he says, throw her down. So they threw her down, and then her blood spattered on the wall, and the horses as they trampled on their foot. And then dogs ate her. So they went out to go find her body, and they barely found anything left. And so dogs ate her. So here we go with another prophecy. It says, they went back to told Jehu, This is the word of the Lord that he spoke through his servant Elijah the Tishbite. On the plot of ground at Jezreel, dogs will devour Jezebel's flesh. So another prophecy we see coming through. Jezebel's body will be like dung on the ground in the plot at Jezreel, and then no one will be able to say this is Jezebel. So she's not even going to have an area that anyone can go and visit and anyone can say that this is her. She was so bad during her life, right? Like, so the payment for her because of all that she did was significant enough that they don't even want to mark the area in which she had been, right? They don't want anyone to kind of go and worship her or sympathize with her or any of those things, right? So we want to obviously be careful of that. Verse 1, 2 Kings 10. There were in Samaria 70 sons of the house of Ahab. All these sons were with servants and other people. And Jehu is now going to test all these people, and he's going to say, whoever thinks that any of these guys can beat me, any of these 70 sons, lift them up, make them king, and then come against me. All the servants were like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to be part of that. None of them are strong enough. And then so Jehu says, take all of their heads and send all of their heads to me. So they did it. The servants took them, killed them, sent their heads to Jehu. Jehu then leaves all of their heads out in front by the gates. It says in 2 piles in front of the gates. So this like reminds me of those kings of old who would like set heads on spikes to scare people so everyone would recognize. And in some ways it's like that. Like, I know we think this is barbaric. I know our generation. It sounds barbaric. Like, right, I've been conditioned to think like this kind of violence is really awful. Meanwhile, while like there's crazy violent video games all over the place that are so much worse than this, but nevertheless. So we've been told that this kind of violence is really bad, right? Like this kind of violence is evil. But the point in this and what Jehu is doing is he's letting everyone know what an outcome could be when you turn from the Lord. It wasn't just that they were making their own decisions, right? And I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent because we kind of hear this all the time. This is some of the manipulations of the day. You do you, I do me, your truth is your truth, my truth is my truth, right? And like we think that that is all well and good, but that's actually not reality. Reality is that whatever thing that we believe, we work our hardest to convince someone else to believe that same thing, right? Like, so if I believe in Jesus and I live in the way that Jesus lives, right? Not only am I saying it with my mouth, which is something that I do, but I'm also trying to live it so then others can see how I live and they have that desire for themselves as well, right? Like, so if I present as somebody that has joy even in the midst of suffering, or somebody that might not have a perfect family, but I'm still happy with it. Somebody that somebody that doesn't have the biggest and grandest of homes, but I still love being in it and having people here, right? Like, so if I'm presenting in that way, right, which is what I believe what Jesus is calling us to do, present in the way that he presents, then I want people to be, so in some ways, convinced. Like, I do this because I follow Jesus and this is what Jesus does, right? So I want to convince you of that. In that same way, those who don't follow the Lord, right? And some of the things that are going on right now, some of these evils that we're being manipulated about right now, they do the same thing, right? We don't keep anything inside our houses as our own business. At the very least, I train my children in the way that I want them to go, right? So in the very least, I'm picking that up and I'm putting it outside of the house. And every person is doing the same. If you love the Phillies, I'm from Philly-ish. If you love the Phillies, there's a good chance that everybody around you knows during the season that you love the Phillies. And they know because you go to games, because you wear their t-shirts, because you talk about their stats, right? Because you talk about the game the next day. So I joke, and some of you who listen to this go to my spin class. I never, ever, never, never watch sports. Never, never. It's not my thing. I don't do sports at all. But my whole spin class watches sports. And because they watch sports, I know more about sports now in this year of my life than I ever knew before, right? And it's because they share that with me. So now I'm becoming more of a sports person. I quote it because I'm, you know, but I'm learning more about sports because of their excitement and vigor for sports, and they are sharing it with me. All that being said, going back to, and I know I went off on a major tangent, but all that being said, because when you do evil, you likely don't believe that it's evil, right? Like you're not openly doing evil, but when you're turning against God, you are. And then you are teaching others to do it as well. You have responsibility for other people. And this is what the Lord is trying to say through Jehu. All these people that have turned away from me, they are no more. And not only are they no more, but they didn't go in a very good way. So be warned, everybody around you, right? Like stop turning from me and going your own way. I have been patient for so long. There have been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 kings at this point in Israel. 10 kings. The Lord has been extremely patient with all of these people that he keeps putting up and in charge, and they all keep turning away from him. And this time he said, this is sort of it, and now I need to show my people that they need to turn back to me, right? They need to make a serious U-turn and come back in my direction. All right, so that's what they did. So he leaves them up there, and then it says so the next thing that he does is he brings other people in. So he follows up. So that's what he did with all of Ahab's family. He destroyed all of them. He killed everyone in the family. All the heads were out in front, and then he killed everyone in their household, their servants, and all their other people. Next, he's coming for Ahaziah. So the next morning, Jehu goes out, and he says, sorry, I'm going to go to verse 12. Jehu sets out towards Samaria. At Beth Eked of the shepherds, he met some of the relatives of Ahaziah, finds Ahaziah, kills all of them as well. So now he has destroyed everyone in the northern kingdom that was in charge, and now he is destroying everyone in the southern kingdom that is in charge. Following up in verse 18, after those two things that he does, then he brings all the people together, and he says, Ahab served Baal a little. Jehu will serve him much. And can I tell you, I read this verse, and I'm like, what? I was so confused. I had to keep reading because I actually kept going back and forth because I was like, it just said to this one guy, he says to this one guy, follow me, and check out all my zeal to the Lord, right? So he now has a follower with him. Check out all my zeal to the Lord. And so I was confused, like, how now is he following Baal? Well, he's not. So he says, summon all the prophets of Baal, all his servants, and all his priests. And he says, see that no one is missing. I'm going to hold this great sacrifice to Baal. But Jehu was acting deceptively in order to destroy the servants of Baal. So he gathers all of them together. He closes them in. He puts guards outside of all the gates. And he says to these guards, like, if anyone gets out, kill them. He makes sure, once everyone is in there, he makes sure that actually none of them are followers of the Lord. So he's kind of like crossing all of his T's, dotting all his I's, as we would say, right? So everyone in there is a follower and a prophet of Baal, and then he's going to sacrifice to Baal, right? So he's doing this whole big thing. He's going to sacrifice everything to Baal. And then he proceeds to kill every single prophet in there. After they make their sacrifice to Baal, he kills everyone. So in verse 28, it says, so Jehu destroyed Baal worship in Israel. However, he did not turn away from the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat. That's the first king that we saw when the kingdom split. And that first king made these 2 golden calves. So the people of Israel, the northern kingdom, wouldn't go down and worship in the southern kingdom and then be lost to the northern kingdom. So he made these new gods, called them God. So Jehu is doing the same exact thing. So he did so good, but not perfectly. Verse 30, the Lord says to Jehu, because you have done well in accomplishing what is right in my eyes, and have done to the house of Ahab all I had in mind to do, your descendants will sit on the throne of Israel for 4 generations, to the 4th generation. Yet, is how we start the next verse, 31. But, in other words, he wasn't careful to keep the law of the Lord with all his heart. He didn't turn away from the sins of Jeroboam, which he caused Israel to commit. So he wasn't fully and wholeheartedly following the Lord with all of his heart. But he made a lot of strides. And so we're going to see what winds up happening with him tomorrow. As we finish up, we close out. I just want you guys to like this if this was a blessing to you. I want you to share it with people, and I want you to subscribe to the channel so you can get it every day. Ring the bell, because then that gives you the notifications so you can find my new video kind of as soon as it drops in the middle of the night. And in the meantime, I want you to read first, right? So keep reading and then come back tomorrow. I'll see you guys next time.